Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads. Hello, everybody. This is Jason from Jason the Home Millennial, and I'm here in my parents' basement in the great state of Kansas. And I thought today is just, it has to be the perfect day to talk about one of my favorite movies of all time. And we're talking about the movie Back to the Future. Back to the Future, which came out 40 years ago, 1985. Um, and I was 2 years old in 1985. So unfortunately, was not able to watch this movie in theater, which I wish I could have. That would have been awesome to see and all that. But it's always been a big movie in my life. I mean, I remember being a kid and seeing this movie the first time when I was very young, 6, 7, 8 years old, somewhere in there. Remember seeing this movie the first time and just loved it. Even as a kid, I was really into this movie. Um, I think because it did have a lot of action and adventure to it. The time travel aspect was always very interesting and fun. And then it was also very funny. I was always a big fan of Doc Brown. I think was always my favorite character. I think just his physicality and everything of Christopher Lloyd's performance was always great as well. And then when I got older, I just appreciated the movie more for the story aspect of it and the character arcs. I think I really enjoyed all that arc, the character arcs, and all that. And it was a movie that was not only just I love sci-fi, I love the idea of time travel. It was always a good idea, and I thought it was very funny as well. You know, there's some a little bit of romance maybe in there. You throw in some drama as well. So there's some actually really good emotional scenes in the movie as well. So it kind of hits all factors and just has an amazing. I think I really loved it because of the ending. I always loved the ending of this movie, where everything turned out for the good. It's like everything could have gone horribly wrong, where he would never exist if things because of him he wouldn't exist because he almost broke up his parents basically or stopped his parents from ever falling in love, but they eventually do. And then he gets back to 1985. It turns out that everything actually happened for the better. His life is actually better than it was prior to him traveling to 1955. So I just love that story aspect and the ending of it and all that. Um, but yeah, so I always loved this movie as a kid and as I got older. And I feel like this is like, I was like, I was taking the movies that I watch. I watched this movie like over and over again. All three movies actually. The whole Back to the Future trilogy, I was a big fan of. Um, I must have had this on VHS or something like that as a kid because I remember watching this movie over and over again, along with Star Wars trilogy. I loved the Star Wars trilogy as a kid, so I would be watching Star Wars. I'd be watching Back to the Future. I was a big fan of Indiana Jones, so I'd be watching the Indiana Jones trilogy. Those are the three that I can think of top of my mind. Besides, like the more animation cartoon movies or the old Disney movies, I used to watch a lot of. As far as like the more adult movies that I was watching as a kid, those are the three franchises I can really remember. Just never could get tired of watching. I was just watching it over and over and over again. Were those three: Star Wars, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones. Anyways, and they all came out. Well, Star Wars came out in the '70s, but then 1983, Last Jedi came out, or Last Jedi, last sorry, Return of the Jedi came out when I was born. So it was in the '80s that movie. Plus, yeah, you got the Indiana Jones come out in the '80s and Back to the Future here in '85. So I don't know, '80s. Those were the three big '80s franchises that I absolutely loved, anyways. But uh, anyway, saying all that, that's why I really want to talk about Back to the Future. It's today one of my favorite movies. It was number 4 on my top 100 favorite movies list. Yeah, top. So it's top 4 movie of all time for me. And it was a movie that I always thought about. Like it was high up on my list, but it wasn't always a top 10 movie. And then I don't know. More recently, I think when I met Mike from Did You See That, which I have his hat, and I thought I'd wear his hat because uh, this is the Did You See That hat because it has the DeLorean, so iconic to Back to the Future, and it has a picture of Mike there, and I think it has some dogs in the car with him, anyways. And that's kind of his logo, I guess. So that's why I thought I gotta wear the DeLorean logo hat from Mike to commemorate this celebration of this great movie, Back to the Future. Um, Yeah, so I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I just felt like I had to do something today about this movie because it's so big. And today, because November 5th is the day, is the day that Doc Brown comes up with the flux capacitor, November 5th, 1955. So now it's November 5th, 2025. So 70 years later, from the time that Doc Brown in the movie had invented this. And of course, that's the time that Marty goes back in time from 1985 to back to 1955 on November 5th. So that's why it's like I had to do it today. There's not a better day to do talk about Back to the Future than on November 5th, which also shout out to my dad. My dad's birthday is today too, and he's 72 years old. Happy birthday to you, Dad. Um, a couple years ago, I did a live stream with Mike from Did You See That? And I, because he's such a big Back to the Future fan. It's funny. I always thought I was the biggest Back to the Future fan growing up. I felt like I always had the movie higher than most people. And then I met Mike, and then I realized I'm not that big of a Back to the Future fan compared to him. He's like an ultra fan. He has Back to the Future tattoos, and it's his favorite movie of all time. He's got all this stuff. He's cosplayed, I think, as Marty McFly before. And I was like, okay, I'm not at that level of Mike. So I'm kind of a more amateur fan of, I feel like, of Back to the Future. But um, yeah, we did a live stream because I want to talk about Back to the Future with him on November, and we did it on November 5th. It might have been like 3 years ago, and it was actually one of my best viewed live streams that I did at the time. I forget how I got a couple hundred like views or something, and it was actually like 4 hours long. It was like the longest live stream I did at that point. I didn't mean to make it that long. It's just, but once he got me and Mike talking about Back to the Future, evidently we just kept talking, and went longer than I expected. But um, definitely check out that live stream on my channel. That was a really cool discussion I had with Mike. I'm trying to get my light up a little bit, but it's not going up anymore. Anyway, that's with the off. Okay. Um, yeah. So again, I didn't know exactly what I'm doing. I have a couple things planned to talk about, I guess, and we'll see if any viewers come in to ask or give any comments on the movie Back to the Future. Anyways, take a drink here. Okay, first, and I read a book recently on the making of Back to the Future, so I have some knowledge of that. Plus, I've like watched the special features. I have the whole trilogy. This book uh, has like three. It has all three movies plus like a bonus disc in it. It's in a box that I didn't want to try to get into. Also, I have the soundtrack too in vinyl, so I have the vinyl soundtrack as well on Back to the Future. And I've seen like a documentary on Back to the Future, and I've seen the Michael J. Fox documentary that was out maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. Anyways, and I've read Michael J. Fox's autobiography as well, I think called Lucky Man. I read that. So that's my knowledge coming from all that, of what I know about Back to the Future. Um, so I talk a little bit about, if you don't know about Back to the Future, but it is very interesting, like how it came to be, I think. And I always like talking about that kind of stuff. So of course, we know Back to the Future was directed by Robert Zemeckis, also written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. They're a bit of a writing partner team that wrote a lot of movies together, and of course, Zemeckis directed them. They met in college, and I couldn't remember exactly what college they went to. It might have been like USC or something like that. That's like the famous film college that filmmakers go to. But they just kind of met each other in college, and Zemeckis, of course, wanted to be a film director. Bob Gale wanted to be a screenplay writer, and they kind of hit it off. They kind of just met in class and just started. I think it was one of those things where they just liked the same kind of music, liked the same kind of pop culture stuff, TV shows, movies, and so they just kind of gelled together really quickly. And when they met, they decided to form a partnership, and they decided that, hey, let's start writing, screenplays together and try to get them made, and Zemeckis will, direct them, all that. So that's how they kind of started their partnership. So it's like one of those things just happened to be in the same place at the same time and formed one of these great writing partnerships and made a lot of really good movies out of it. So yeah, that's where they came from. Of course, they get their feet on the ground. Um, I know the first movie they ended up making was a movie called "I Want to Hold Your Hand," um, which is a very interesting movie. Again, I don't know if this came out. I don't know if it was late 70s when that movie came out or 1980. It was somewhere around that era that that movie came out that Zemeckis directed, and it was about these teenagers who were going to go to the New York to the Ed Sullivan show where the Beatles played. You know, they're all big Beatles fans, and they go to see the Beatles, and kind of you see what the misadventures they have on this journey. Anyways, and I actually really liked the movie. I saw that movie as a kid because I was a big Beatles fan since I was like a kid. And I remember first time watching it as a kid, I actually really liked the movie. And I watched it recently, still really like that movie. I think it's a very underrated Robert Zemeckis movie. I don't think it did particularly well in the theater, or was not a lot of people talk about that movie, or it's not as well known. Interesting, like one of the main characters, actress, I forget her name. She is Marty McFly's sister in Back to the Future, and she was one of the main actresses in that movie. I Want to Hold Your Hand, and was very good and very funny there. Anyway, so yeah, so they did Want to Hold Your Hand. Didn't really do much. One of the funny things is what I know Zemeckis became friends with Steven Spielberg, which was a pretty good person to be friends with, who I think really believed in him and really, wanted to help him out to wanted him to make it, as a director. I guess I don't know if he saw something or they're just friends. So it was nice that he had that, he had Steven Spielberg kind of backing him as well. Um, they actually wrote a screenplay for a movie that would eventually become 1941, which is a comedy that Spielberg made, I think, around 1980 or so. Uh, and it's the biggest bomb of Spielberg's career, and it's, in my opinion, the worst Spielberg movie. I watched all of Spielberg's movies, and I did a Spielberg ranking not too long ago. And yeah, 1941, I had dead last. I think it's the worst Spielberg movie, and I've seen a lot of lists where that is dead last. So I think it's pretty common to be considered Spielberg's worst movie. And his first big bomb, because he was on fire at this point. Made Jaws in '75, which is a huge, huge blockbuster, and got Oscar nominations for best, picture. I think maybe director. All this. He also did Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which was did very well. Um, it was an Oscar type movie as well. And I don't know. I guess he wanted to try to do a comedy, and it didn't work. And it's a messy movie. I don't know how much of that's Zemeckis and Gale's fault, how much of that's Spielberg's fault. I don't know. It just didn't work. There's just way too many characters, and it had a big cast with like Jim Belushi, Dan Aykroyd was in there, and just yeah, had a pretty good cast overall. But there's just way too many characters, and there's too many plot lines going at the same time. It was just hard to follow. It was just a very messy edit and just wasn't funny. It was supposed to be a comedy, and it really wasn't all that funny, which is a problem when it's a comedy. And maybe just proves that Spielberg's just not good at comedies. And his best work is with the sci-fi, action, adventure type movies, kind of his bread and butter, thrillers, that kind of stuff. Anyway, so yeah, it's weird that Zemeckis and Gale, like I said, great writing partnership, but then wrote one of the worst comedies probably ever made, 1941. But anyways, he ended up going his next movie that they wrote and he directed was called Used Cars, with Kurt Russell in the lead. And I watched this recently. It's a comedy about a used car salesman who's competing against a rival car salesman across the street or whatever, and he's trying to make money so he can. He wants to run for Congress or something like that, and so they do some very sleazy tactics to try to get more people to come uh, to their used cars lot. Anyways, overall, it wasn't particularly that great. I love Kurt Russell; he's great in the movie role, the lead. He's very good. Perfect casting. It wasn't particularly that funny or that interesting of a premise of a movie, anyways. And I don't know, it didn't work real well overall. And it's another movie that didn't do particularly well in the box office. So already Zemeckis got two movies, both of them not doing all that great. So he really didn't have much momentum going with him at this time. And it's hard when I think when you're trying to direct or write, if your movies aren't doing well, I mean, especially if your movie bombs, you can get kind of blacklisted where like no one wants to work with you because like you're only known for making movies that don't make money. So that could have been a problem, but luckily, like I said, he had Spielberg behind him, helping him out, I think, and uh, enough people believed in him. Luckily, he kept going and didn't ruin his career. Anyway, so um, anyway, this kind of gets to Back to the Future, where we're talking about here. Bob Gale was at home and he was looking through his dad's yearbook. Anyways, and he saw that his dad was the president of the school, whatever. He was like the school president, and he never knew that about his dad. And he was like, "Wow, I didn't know he's school president." All this, and he thought that was interesting. And then a thought that came to him that really was the core of uh, doing Back to the Future was he thought to himself, what if I knew my dad in high school? What if we were in high school together? Would I be friends with my dad? And that was kind of a funny idea he had. It's like, would I like my dad in high school? Would we be friends? Would I not like him? Would we get along? Would we not get along? And it's a very interesting thought, I think, for anybody. And it's definitely a very good idea for, a core thought for a movie, I think. That is an interesting thought of what it'd be like to meet your parents when they were your age. Because I think, you never think of your parents as being kids or being teenagers, because they were always adults. When you're a kid, as soon as you remember anything, your parents were the adults, and you just figure they were always adults. And then, of course, at some point you realize, oh, yeah, they were teenagers too, just like me. They had the same teenager problems that I had as a teenager, and they didn't have their life together either, like I don't. But you don't think about that, at first until you get older. So it's a really interesting idea that he had, like, and he kind of started working on it, like, here's an idea for a movie. Like somehow we have to go back in time, and a character, gets to go to, meet his dad or whatever. When that's kind of the core of it, and that kind of turned into a time travel movie. Of course, I thought, how can we get the only way you can get yours, to be a teenager at the same time as your dad is if you went back in time. So that kind of became the core of the movie that he was writing, this movie about traveling back in time to when your parents were in high school and all this. And then, of course, him and Zemeckis started working ideas, and they kind of came up with this really great story for a movie, of course, called Back to the Future. And I know there's funny things, of course. You always have to go through a bunch of rewrites. I know originally they were thinking of the time travel machine being, um, hey, there's Mike, the legend himself from Did You See That? The biggest Back to the Future fan I know personally. um, how you doing, Mike? Um, so let's see. Oh, Back to the Future sucks. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. Here I, here I talked so much about you, Mike, about how big fan you are of Back to the Future. Uh, said no one ever. Yeah, I've never met anybody that doesn't like Back to the Future. I feel like that's one of those movies where universally, I'm pretty sure, unless someone can tell me wrong, but it feels like universally that's always a very well liked movie. It's like, how can you not like Back to the Future? But yeah, so I'm just talking about the making of the movie a little bit right now, Mike, and you can chime in if you want to at any time of your expertise knowledge. And I got your hat here, Mike, by the way. Uh, yeah, so they're writing Back to the Future. Oh yeah, it's going to be a refrigerator. I was going to say the time travel machine was going to be a refrigerator, which I don't know how that made sense. You had to get into the refrigerator and then I don't know. There's some dials you had to do with to go back in time to what. Anyways, that was the original idea, and I think soon they fear like, well, that doesn't make much sense. And how do you write that in the story of a refrigerator going back in time? Um, uh, and then the coming at the idea that it should be a car, I think is one of the most genius ideas of this movie. That's the best time travel. We've seen time travel before. Usually it's some kind of machine that they make or that you step into that can, go through time. I mean, we've seen it in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It's a phone booth. And we even see it in Hot Tub Time Machine where the hot tub it makes you go back in time. So I suppose you can use anything if you want for a time. But to me, the car is the best idea for a time travel machine because then you can, and the idea that just everything about it, just the idea that you have to go so fast for everything to like work. that's just a cool idea, because that brings a lot of, I think, drama into the movie of like, oh, do I have enough room to go fast enough to get 88 miles per hour for the time travel thing to trigger? I think it's a really great idea. Plus, then once you travel back in time, you can then drive the car. So it's a good transportation device whenever you time travel. So it's genius, I think, once they came up with the time travel, the DeLorean car. And I know DeLorean's probably because, and I never heard of DeLorean except for Back to the Future, because it has such a cool door open. I think that's why they probably decided it looked like a futuristic car, maybe because of the door opening. They thought, oh, that would be look cool in the movie. Though I've heard Tom Wilson say in interviews that uh, there's no room in the DeLorean, and it's very hard to get into a DeLorean. And Tom Wilson's a tall guy who plays Biff, so I thought that was interesting. That it's really not a good car, but it looks cool in Back to the Future, anyways. So yeah, so that's where they come with the time travel. I know. Anyway, so I'm sure there's other ideas that they kind of went and drafted and didn't work, and they eventually come up with the story we have. I mean, I do love the story. I guess I'm gonna talk about the story here in a little bit more in detail, maybe. But the whole idea that you need plutonium, and we're in the Cold War in the '80s, whatever, and so that kind of made sense. Again, obviously, time travel is not possible. We're never going to time travel, so it's always interesting. A lot of times, it's just like, oh, it's magic. We time traveled, At least this kind of gives you kind of an interesting idea of like, what if you had a bunch of plutonium and somehow scientifically, for someone who knows nothing about science, I kind of go, yeah, that makes sense. Sure, plutonium. That's like a lot of energy or something. They make bombs out of them. So yeah, you have that much energy at plutonium. Why not time travel? That kind of, it's like I don't know about scientists what they think about this movie, but or physicists, theorists, whatever. But to me, it's like, yeah, that's a cool idea if you can get your hands on some plutonium or lightning. Lightning has a lot of power. So it's just the idea is that if you have a lot of power, that could trigger all the stuff that you need for time travel. Obviously, that can't happen in real life, but yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah, one of my favorite lines in the movie: 121 gigawatts. I love how Doc Brown said there. Christopher Lloyd says that on there. Let's see. I think I've maybe met one or two people who aren't a fan. Okay, so you met some that didn't like it, and you buried them in your backyard, probably. I'm just kidding. See, Bob Gale was recently asked if Marty's brother works at the Burger King next to Doc's 1985 house. And he said he doesn't know as he has never been asked before. Okay. Because there's a Burger King by Doc's house? Is that what the deal is? I didn't know that. I didn't remember it was Burger King. That I knew you've worked fast food, but I couldn't remember it was Burger King. Note this interesting fact: my very first job was working at Burger King when I was 18. That was my first job. I have to say, Back to the Future is one of the biggest movies. This is 40 years old, and hardly none of the cast are dead. I was going to mention that because I was thinking about the cast, and yeah, they're all alive. That is actually kind of incredible. Mostly because of Christopher Lloyd is in his 80s, and he's still alive, still doing movies and stuff like that. And yeah, no crazy, I think the sister's dead. The actress plays this Marty McFly's sister. I think she died. But besides that, yeah, a lot of the main cast is still together, and they still do Comic Con stuff, which is really cool. And of course, Michael J. Fox, of course, has he's had Parkinson's for quite a while. Yeah. So anyway, so they write the script for Back to the Future. Yeah, the sister and the clock lady. Okay, the clock lady. Yeah, that makes sense. So they write the script, and then again, they're trying to get it, bought by the movie studios. But because he doesn't have a hit under his belt, no one really is clamoring to get a Robert Zemeckis, Bob Gale script made. And a lot of the companies, which was interesting, thought it wasn't raunchy enough of a movie, because I guess raunchy movies were like the big thing at the moment, which I think is weird because I mean, non-raunchy movies are still big, I would think, in the 80s, but for a reason, I think they thought that was like a big trend at the moment. which it makes me wonder if that's because of like I'm guessing Animal House was a big, that's when comedy started to get really raunchy. I always feel like Animal House was the first kind of one of the first like really raunchy comedies that came out, and it was kind of I'm guessing did pretty well maybe in the box office and is iconic today. But I know you had like uh, Revenge of the Nerds. That movie came out. It was a very raunchy comedy. Caddyshack not so raunchy, but comedy at the time. It's still rated R. I'm trying to think what else, but it definitely was maybe a trend of raunchy comedies, and so they wanted to actually be more raunchy or something like that, which was weird. And I guess they didn't want to do that, so they kind of passed on it. And then you get to Disney, you think, oh well, Disney will like it. This seems like, in fact, it's crazy that this is not a Disney movie because I feel like maybe it's a good thing because Disney probably would have made a bunch of sequels by now, or tried to spin-offs and stuff like that. But anyways, um, Disney, they go to Disney, you think, oh, this would be the perfect movie for Disney to like take on. But they passed because it was too raunchy. So, and that's all because of the Leah Thompson playing Lorraine, uh, has hots for her son, Marty, but she doesn't know it's his son, of course, and she even kisses him at one point, which was somewhat controversial, I think, for people at the time, which I never thought that was that big deal because she obviously didn't know, or it would be really weird. I mean, today we have Game of Thrones where we have brothers and sisters doing all kinds of stuff, and cousins and aunts and uncles. So I've seen plenty of bad stuff on TV at this point. But it's funny how this was controversial. Too much for Disney, so they like passed on it. So yeah, so you couldn't get this movie made, Back to the Future, which is crazy when you look at it and you go, this is such a good script, such a cool story. It seems like it should be a easy hit movie to make, but at the time no one believed in it. Funny enough, which happens a lot of times. Which I'm kind of convinced that movie producers really don't know what they're doing. They just have theories. They just get lucky sometimes. I think most movie producers, they make a movie and most of them are terrible because they really don't know what they're doing. But then every once in a while, they'll get the right movie, the right director, right cast, and they'll make a good movie and they get lucky. And then when they do that, when they get lucky on a movie, the movie producers will go, yeah, I knew this was going to be a big movie from the start, or I knew it was going to win an Oscar, or I knew it was going to be a big hit. Just as soon as I saw the script was so good. And I think, bull crap, you don't know what you're doing. Movie producers, are just, guessing what's going to be hit or not. And sometimes they pass on movies for stupid reasons, and sometimes they get movies for stupid. I don't know. It's all just a crapshoot, anyways. And unfortunately, they shouldn't have passed on this movie because it ended up being a big one. Let's see. Disney didn't like the Marty's mom hits on. Yeah, exactly. Imagine if they took it on, they could have been 15 Back to the Future movies, prequel TV shows, etc. like stars. That's what I'm thinking. Like, if they would have got a hold of it, we would have had so many spin-off TV shows. What would be a good spin-off, Mike? What would be a good spin-off TV show? I always said I always want I want like a Cobra Kai TV show where Biff gets his life together and back in the 50s as a teenager and makes some kind of he's like the Johnny in it, and he redeems himself. He realizes that his bully days he was bad, and he has some kind of redemption story arc in the 60s. Like, that would be a TV show I want to watch. Biff having a redemption story arc in the 60s and actually becomes a good person and becomes friends with George McFly, who he bullied all of those years. And anyways, and they come together. That's what I want to see, a Biff spinoff, because I do love Biff. Biff is one of the greatest. Tom Wilson's so good in that role, so underrated, one of the best villain roles I think of all time. Really a terrible person, but funny. See, I generally don't think any filmmakers who any clue. That's what I'm saying. I don't think they know. They act like they know once it's a hit. They're like, "Yeah, I knew it was gonna be a hit," and I'm like, "No, you didn't. You just got lucky." Anyway, so there, so oh, okay. So then the thing that made Back to the Future happen was Zemeckis then got to direct a movie called Romancing the Stone, another good action adventure movie in the 80s. Another movie I really enjoy, and I believe I have a DVD of that as well somewhere. Um, and that starts Michael Douglas in it. And yeah, so that movie ended up becoming a big hit. He makes that movie, it's a big hit. And after he made that big hit movie, then all of a sudden all the studios are like, oh, on second thought, maybe we should try this Back to the Future movie. Let's look at it again. So then everybody wanted to make Back to the Future. It's kind of funny how that works. Before it's like nobody wants it, then afterwards everybody's, they always just, again, they don't know what they're doing, Mike. Like I think that's what we're saying. I don't think they know what they're doing. They just know when something gets big, they're like, all right, let's hit this while it's hot. Let's hit this is this director is popular right now, so let's try to get as much money out of him as we can. um Anyways, so that's what happened. um let's see what we got. Also another prequel idea. Prequel, okay. Marty's upbringing, the upbringing he got in the first 1985 when his family are lame. Yeah. Okay, so we go back to the alternative 1985 after he traveled to 1955, comes back, and now the family is uh, successful. They're all successful. They're all better dressed, better looking, richer, all these things. So yeah, let's see a prequel where how did they go from being lame family to being a rich family? Yeah, let's see that prequel, which we missed. Yeah, we missed the whole time between whenever, I guess, because once Marty McFly changed everything in 1955, that changed the 30 years that whenever he was born, all that. Anyways, that's a good prequel idea. um, yeah, so they ended up going to Universal. Universal ended up buying, I guess, the script, whatever, and that's where they made their movie. And Zemeckis got to direct. Steven Spielberg got to produce, which is pretty nice as well. Um, and so they went on to make Back to the Future, and of course, famously, they wanted Michael J. Fox to play Marty McFly. Michael J. Fox, interesting. He was a Canadian actor who was around 24, I think, when Back to the Future came out. Of course, he's playing like a teenager, but he's so small. He's a small guy. He always has a young look to him, so he does fit the teenager role. Uh, the big thing he did was Family Ties. He was kind of did stuff here and there. He did Teen Wolf, I think, around the same time as Back to the Future as well. But Family Ties, which I've actually never watched the show, but that ended up becoming a big hit for him, and he became very popular on Family Ties. And so that's kind of what got him, I think, noticed for Back to the Future, because Zemeckis, I think, definitely wanted Marty McFly to be funny. I think he really wanted to be a. I mean, the thing about Back to the Future is it's very funny, and all the actors are very funny in it. So he didn't want too serious of a tone. He wanted a more comedic tone. Sorry, to the movie. So I think that's why Michael J. Fox to him was like the perfect cast, because again he was really hot at the time because of Family Ties, and he was the right age or right age range, and all these things. So that's who they really want. So they went after Michael J. Fox, and but Family Ties went on for it got up for another season, and so they had the rights, I guess, to like deny him movies and other projects. And so the producers or whatever, the showrunner of Family Ties was kind of like, no, we're not going to loan you out. We're not going to loan Michael J. Fox out for Back to the Future because he has to shoot, for the next season. And I guess they were making Back to the Future at the same time. They had to shoot the next season of Family Ties. So they said, no, we won't let you use them for the movie. And so they were very disappointed because they really wanted Michael J. Fox. So like, and Michael J. Fox, I think, really wanted to do the movie, but it was just one of those things. Similar thing happened to Pierce Brosnan, who was doing Remington Steele TV show, and he was like hired, or I think they wanted him for the next James Bond movie, and he was going to do it. I think he got hired and everything, but then Remington Steele got renewed for like another season, and so then he couldn't do James Bond at that time. But then after he was done with Remington Steele, of course, he went on to do James Bond. So it's weird that happens sometimes with TV shows where they kind of got a hold on an actor and won't let him go for the movies. Yeah, so then they had to go to another actor named Eric Stoltz, who will go on to do movies like Mask, I know, and he did other movies. Anyways, so Eric Stoltz, around the same age, he was then hired. This is such a weird thing. I didn't know this for the longest time. This is more of a recent thing that I found out that I don't know if this was talked too much. Maybe it was, and I just found this out in the last 5 years or so that Eric Stoltz was he got hired to play Marty McFly, and not only that, but they shot a fair amount of the movie with Eric Stoltz as Marty McFly. I mean, the 1955 stuff they shot with him, where he meets George and he has the fight with Biff in the diner. Yeah, so there's lots of scenes. Evidently, you can see like the deleted scenes or something on of Eric Stoltz playing the character, which is weird. Not seeing Michael J. Fox. Anyways, so they hired Eric Stoltz for the role, and as they're filming it, Robbie Zemeckis didn't like what he was getting at Eric Stoltz. Eric Stoltz evidently was like being very serious. He didn't really get the comedy of the scenes and the character, and played it just very serious. You know, almost played like this like serious method actor kind of thing. I think probably got on the probably really got on the nerves of Zemeckis. I'm sure, who's like trying to direct him into be like, we gotta be this is a little more funny. This isn't so serious. We wanted more of a comedic tone, and Stoltz wouldn't do it. He was just too, because Stoltz evidently looked at the character as like this tragic character. I don't know. I've heard this saying that he said that, oh, this character is so tragic and sad, and so he played it this very tragic, sad kind of tone, I think, and Zemeckis hated it. He just hated it. It did not work. He couldn't, and he tried to make it work because he was like, I guess this is our guy. We couldn't get Michael J. Fox, so we got to try to make it work with Eric Stoltz. But I think as he looked at the dailies, he was like, this guy's just not getting it. He's not doing what I want. It's not working. His tone of acting is just not working with the rest of the movie. Whatever. Anyways, and so then but he knew that studio probably wanted him or something like that. So he felt like he needed a second opinion. So he got Steven Spielberg to come down and look at the dailies, I guess, and say basically, Spielberg, you look at this. Tell me if I'm crazy. Am I right or am I wrong that this is not working with this actor? And Spielberg looked at it and said, no, you're right. It's not working with Eric Stoltz. He's not getting, the tone of the movie. So once he got Spielberg to kind of agree with him, he kind of got to use that to go to the studio and say, we just cannot use this guy. He's just not working. It's just not going to be good, And this, which is very unusual, I think. I know this happened sometimes, like, again, I'm going to use other references, but I know Lord of the Rings, they didn't originally have, what's his name for Aragorn. They ended up hiring somebody else for Aragorn, but then Peter Jackson thought he was like too young, or he just didn't have the right, I don't know, tone, look, whatever, of the character. And so they end up, and they were shooting, I think they shot some stuff with him, but they ended up getting rid of him, I think, somewhat early in the process, and getting, I'm forgetting his name, the guy that plays Aragorn, who's a really good actor and very good. It's one of those things where, yeah, it definitely worked with him better in that role. So we have seen that happen before, but it's somewhat unusual to shoot a bunch of scenes and then have to go, yeah, we got to reshoot all these scenes. That's money. Studio doesn't like to spend money, so I'm sure they did not like the idea of having to get rid of this actor that they already hired and paid maybe some money to, and shot some scenes that now they got to reshoot and all this. But they agreed, I guess, to, yeah, okay. And of course, Zemeckis was like, we gotta have Michael J. Fox. He is the perfect cast for this character. Like, and so the studio really pushed to get it with Family Ties. He really pushed for it, and they finally worked out a deal. And if you watch the Michael J. Fox documentary, he really goes into like how it worked, and it is crazy. Like, I don't know how he survived. I couldn't do it, but he would go do Family Ties, I think, during the day or something, or he would get up real early. Like, it's funny, like he would have a chauffeur who would arrive at his house, wake him up in his apartment or whatever, make him coffee as he got up and got dressed or something, that took a shower or whatever, and then he'd get in the car and he would sleep in the car on the way to like shooting Family Ties or something like that. And he got up early to go do Family Ties, and then he would do Family Ties like during the day, and then at night he would go. The chauffeur would take him to Back to the Future a lot, to shoot Back to the Future, and so then at night he would be doing Back to the Future, and then he'd be doing that well into the early mornings. Then he'd get drove him back to his apartment. He'd go to bed, and the whole process, it's just insane. Like he got no sleep during how many months it took to shoot Back to the Future, which is crazy because he's so good in Back to the Future, and he's just spot on, uh, just amazing, and he has so much charisma and energy. Really, really great in the role. So you would have no idea that he just got no sleep during that time period because he was doing a TV show, and it's crazy. His big hit TV show and the biggest hit movie of 1985, one of the biggest hit movies of the 80s. So that's Michael J. Fox. Anyway, just talk a little bit about that. That's one of the crazy stories about it. Of course, we got Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown. Looking at Chris Lloyd, he was like in his late 40s at this point. Um, he was mostly, like, I looked him up, like he was his first role. He had a small part in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but it's a very small role. Besides that, he didn't really do anything big until Taxi, the show Taxi, which I haven't seen that show. I've seen clips, but he played the Reverend Jim or something like that, one of the taxi drivers. And from scenes that I've seen, he looks very funny. Like, he's a very, very funny actor. And so that was his big breakout role, it seems like, is being on Taxi up to this point. He was also in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, playing a Klingon villain. And I think a couple of things I've seen. But anyways, so he wasn't like a big name actor at this point, but I think Back to the Future definitely made him a big name and got him a lot of more work. Obviously, he did the Back to the Future movies. He'd also do Who Framed Roger Rabbit with Robert Zemeckis in the 80s as well. Um, uh, I'm trying to think. Well, the biggest movies are definitely Back to the Future, I think, for Christopher Lloyd. He did some TV and won some Emmys though, so he did well in TV. And I'm thinking what movie I should. Oh, Addams Family. He was in the Addams Family movies. Angels in the Outfield was a favorite movie of mine as a kid. Anyways, so he did a lot of work, and even today, he was just in Nobody 2, I believe. The Nobody 1 and 2, whatever. So, and he's in his 80s, so he's still going on. He was even in The Mandalorian season 3, funny enough, in an episode. But yeah, so Christopher Lloyd, amazing. Love him as Doc Brown. He is so funny in that role. Like I said, we got Leah Thompson as Marty's mom, Lorraine. um, I was looking at her. She was in some movies that I've kind of heard of, but I don't think I've seen before this. This definitely was her breakout role. I don't think she's done anything nearly as big as Back to the Future. The 3 Back to the Future movies definitely been her biggest stuff. Um, uh, as she was in uh, Howard the Duck, one of the worst movies ever made at this point. And she was in Red Dawn, actually, right before this, before Back to the Future, and something else I forget. But anyways, man, she was one of the hottest '80s babes. She was smoking hot in this movie, and in all these movies. But yeah, that was Lee Thompson, and I looked at her. She still works. Mostly, I think she does more like Hallmark type movies now, because she's now in her and like Michael J. Fox and Chris Glover, Tom Wilson. They're all like in their late 60s, mid late 60s now, I would say. So she still works and stuff, anyways, but nothing nearly as big as this movie. Chris Glover is a very interesting actor. His dad was actually in a James Bond movie, Diamonds Are Forever. But anyways, Chris Glover, he's another actor. He was in a couple of stuff I've heard of before this, maybe, but don't know that much about. But this definitely was his breakout role, of course, again. In fact, I know reading the Back to the Future book, Leah Thompson and Chris Glover were like friends because I think they made a movie together, if I remember right. And so they actually were good friends when they were making this movie, interesting enough. And but Chris Glover, very, kind of interesting. I don't know what the word to say. He definitely got interesting, career where this movie should have been this movie was his breakout career. He is so funny in this movie as George McFly. He is so good in this role. And then he doesn't come back for the other 2 Back to the Future. He's the only main actor that doesn't come back. He ends up suing, for someone. They replaced him with another actor and put prosthetics on to make him look like Chris Glover. He ended up suing, of course. So he has a very, bad history with Back to the Future, it sucks because he's so good in this movie and he should have gone on to have this great career. But I feel like his career somewhat stalled after this. He was in stuff here and there that I saw, but nothing big or major, like no major uh, leading role. He should have been like a leading man, maybe of the '80s, one of the young leaders, kind of like Michael J. Fox was. Um, he was a little strange, I know, on set. Like he did make. He's another guy who just like did what he wanted and didn't really listen to direction sometimes. And I know he made Zemeckis mad because Zemeckis would say, "All right, come and you're gonna stand on this spot when you do the scene." And he would go over there and he would move around the set and not stand in the spot, that you're supposed to stand in for, the cameras and the lights and all the angles that the director wants. And he kept being like, George, sorry, George, Crispin, like, you got to get on the spot. And Crispin was kind of like, I feel like the character would move around. He kind of had this like, I'm the character, I'm this method kind of character actor. And so I'm going to do what I think the character wants. And it's like, no, stupid, just do what the director wants you to do. I'm sure that was very annoying of him. I know at one point they duct taped him in a chair because he's supposed to be in a chair or something like that. But he kept getting up or he kept doing something. And so they ended up duct taping his like hands to the chair to like be like, stop moving, Crispin, just stay in one spot. Anyway, so I never heard the stories like that. He also had some weird things like he was on David Letterman show and he was kind of crazy, kind of acting kind of crazy on there. And he was doing high kicks for some reason. And he did a high kick and it hit David Letterman in the head. He like high kicked David Letterman in the head. And David Letterman was like, okay, that's it. And they went to commercial and they took him off. And Letterman, he never was on Letterman ever again. He kind of got banned from the Letterman show, Late Night with Letterman, because of that. Anyways, and then since then, he never really had that big of a career. He's been in stuff though. Even looking at his filmography, he still does stuff today. He's in little stuff here and there. He was in Hot Tub Time Machine. I just talked about that as another Time Machine movie, and he's actually pretty funny in that. It's kind of a small role. Again, he did small roles. He was like in Charlie's Angels movie, I know, and he was in Alice in Wonderland. So he did have roles here and there, but I don't know. It felt like he should have had a bigger career. But anyways, that's Crispin Glover. Um, then I want to talk about Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson, again, I saw he did a couple TV shows before this movie, but he was really just a stand-up comedian. He was a very tall stand-up comedian, which is funny because Biff is such a horrible character, and he doesn't really showcase how funny I think Tom Wilson is. I think more in Back to the Future 3, I think he showcases a little more of his comedic side in that as what's his name? As the outlaw. Buford is a Buford Tanner, Mad Dog Buford Tanner or something like that. Tom Wilson's such an interesting, to get this role, and he is so good as Biff Tanner, so perfect because he is tall, he is menacing. Like again, as a stand-up comedian, it's so crazy because he is very scary, kind of menacing bully. You really believe him. Like I'm like, yeah, I hate this guy. He's such a terrible human being, and throughout the whole series. But anyways, so Tom Wilson does this movie, and again, nothing doesn't really do anything that major after this. He's in stuff here and there throughout his career, and even today he still does stuff every once in a while. And I've seen him in stuff here and there, but I don't know, just didn't really. I know he did some stand-up comedy. I've seen one of his stand-up. Uh, it might have been shot in the '80s or '90s. I saw one of his. I don't know if I saw on YouTube. I probably looked up on YouTube, I think, and he had like a stand-up show that he did, like a 30-minute stand-up, what do we call it? And it's pretty good. I actually overall like it. And it's like, it's crazy to go, wow, this is Biff. He sounds nothing like Biff when he's just himself. But you should check out Tom Wilson's YouTube channel. It is really good. He does a lot of stuff talking about, what it's like to be a kind of a celebrity after, so many years after Back to the Future, and he does Comic Cons and stuff like that. And he's so good. He's so funny in real life. And yeah, his YouTube stuff is so good because he talks about, experience of being, people still love him, people still come up to him today because he's Biff and he's always going to be known as Biff, and how he lives with that he's always going to be Biff, and also his family. He also talks to his family members about whether they think about, having a celebrity, dad or brother or whatever. Anyways, very good. So check out Tom Wilson's YouTube channel. It's really good. But yeah, I don't know how much more to say that about Tom Wilson, but I really loved him in this movie as well. Uh, I think that's the main cast I'm gonna talk about. I mean, there's other people like Claudia Wells. She didn't do the second or third movie. She only did the first movie. One funny fact I thought, which is really crazy, and I didn't look up the actress's name. I wish I did, but there was an actress that was originally going to be, I forget her name, but it's going to be Marty McFly's girlfriend in the 1985, uh, which is played by Claudia Wells in this first movie. But when they hired Eric Stoltz first, when they got Eric Stoltz to play Marty McFly, they hired this actress, a different actress than Claudia Wells, to be the girlfriend. And again, Mike, you might tell me I forgot what the name of the girlfriend is, because she's only the first part of the movie. Um, but this actress they got ended up being Jane from I think her name was Jane from The Office. If you know The Office TV show, The American Office, uh, Michael Scott, his boss is this girl, this female who then they become a couple, and they live together in some of the seasons, and then they break up, and then she kind of disappears as a character. But um, Jennifer, yeah, Jennifer is the name of the girlfriend. Yeah, yeah. So they had this actress play Jennifer, who then went on to be in The Office, like I said, and which I had no idea until I read the book about the making of Back to the Future. I was like, wow, she could have been in Back to the Future, one of the biggest movies. What happened was when they got rid of Eric Stoltz and they hired back Michael J. Fox. Well, Michael J. Fox is really short, and they wanted an actress who wasn't taller than or I think maybe wasn't taller than Michael J. Fox. So they had needed a shorter actress. So the actress that was originally cast as Jennifer was too tall. So man, what a sucky way to lose your job on the biggest movie of the one of the biggest movies of the '80s and franchises. She could have been in the whole trilogy, and she would have been known for not just The Office, but being the Back to the Future trilogy. So she missed out on a really big deal there. But she ended up getting let go just because she was taller than Michael J. Fox, and so they had to let her go. Which man, that really sucks. And then they got Claudia Wells because she was, I guess, short enough that they thought they can have her in a scene with Michael J. Fox. Anyways, and so that's how that works. So I thought that was a very interesting tidbit as well. Let me see what Mike. I know Mike's been writing some stuff here, so let's see what he's been saying. Mike says Emma made a great point the other day. All right, what was Emma, which is Mike's wife? What did Emma say? Let's see what we got. All right, so I have to get kind of close because I have my sunglasses on. I can't see too good. She said when Marty changes the future and now in 1985, his parents and family successful, etc. His upbringing would have changed, and any memories he made, only he would remember the memories. Yeah, there's definitely some problems with, I guess, the whole time travel aspect or the changing the future. And now, do you have memory? You wouldn't have any of the memories. Would you have the memories of the new memories? Because you would have all these new memories of your family and everything that happened, even though we don't see you live them. But you also would have the old memories of before time got changed. So you'd have, I guess I'm saying maybe is you would have both memory of before you alternate 1985, before you change the future from 1955, you'd have still the memories of what your life was like before time changed, before life got changed from time travel. But would you have the memories, the new memories of growing up? Because everything, anyways, I don't know if that makes sense, but everything changed. So would you have both old memories and new memories? That would be very strange. How does that work? That is maybe a problem with the whole thing. Like, obviously, it's a fantasy kind of, it's a sci-fi. This couldn't work, but who knows? Here, talking about Eric Stoltz here. I think Mike's talking about here. Both Bobs did not want Stoltz. However, a big producer was adamant to have him as Marty. Yeah. They gave it a shot as Michael J. Fox was not available. None of the cast likes Stoltz either. Yeah, I try to remember. I know it's funny. Tom Wilson, he kind of has a funny story about the scene where he gets punched by. Because I think the only thing that still stays about Eric Stoltz, I think, is when he gets punched. in the diner scene, there's a diner scene where he's bowling George McFly, and Marty trips him, and he stands up, and he's gonna rough up Marty, and then Marty goes, "What the hell is that?" and Biff looks, and he decks him and knocks him back on the table. I believe when he gets decked, that might still be Eric Stoltz's actual hand. I think they kept that in the shot. But Tom Wilson talks about how when he got punched, like Eric Stoltz was again very like more meta type actor, and I think he really was like punching Tom Wilson. And Tom Wilson was, I think he like, and I think they had to do the scene, a couple times or something like that, to get the scene right. So I think he like, all right, he's gonna punch him, and he punched him, and he really kind of hit him, and he's just like, taken back, and he was kind of like, hey Eric, you really got me on that, maybe, you're supposed to, pretend like you're punching me. You're not really supposed to punch me or something like that, or you're not supposed to punch me that hard. I don't know. I think he talked to Eric Stoltz about it and whatever. And then I think they did a retake, and Eric Stoltz hit him again and did the same thing. And it was one of those things where it's like Tom Wilson's like his first movie, he doesn't want to make any, he doesn't want to deck, Eric Stoltz or anything. He doesn't want a big fight, and he doesn't want to lose his job. I think he's thinking, I'm just gonna have to, let that go because this is a big job for me. I don't want to lose a job. So he took these hits from Eric Stoltz, and I think, and he says in the back of his mind, he thought, I'm gonna get Eric Stoltz back. Like in one of these scenes where I have to rough him up, like I'm gonna rough him up. I think he had in the back of his mind that he was gonna, really go at him in one of the scenes. And that's what he was hoping for. He's like, all right, I'm gonna remember this, Eric Stoltz kind of thing. And then Eric Stoltz got let go. And so then they brought in Michael J. Fox. And then it's like he never got his chance to get back at Eric Stoltz for hitting him all those times in the diner, because he didn't want to mess up. Of course, he had nothing against Marty, so he's not gonna rough up Marty. But I think he felt like he got gypped, that he never got the chance to get back at Eric Stoltz. So yeah, I can see that Tom Wilson probably didn't like him that much. I can't remember if Leah Thompson said anything about not liking him. It's possible, but I can kind of get it. I felt like he was like not listening to direction. He's being too, like I said, he's being too serious. He's not trying to fit the tone of the movie, and they kept. And again, I don't remember if what's his name, Christopher Lloyd said anything either about it. I feel like he hasn't said anything too bad about Eric Stoltz, and again, I feel like some might say, I like Eric Stoltz, but he just wasn't good in this movie. He just didn't fit. It was one of those things where Eric Stoltz was not a bad actor. He wasn't not a bad cast necessarily. Maybe he could have worked. Maybe if they did it, it's one of those things. Would it have been as good of a movie without Michael J. Fox? Probably not. It feels like Michael J. Fox was just, he is Marty McFly. It's hard to see anybody else be that role. He's just so good in it. Eric Stoltz, maybe it still would have been an okay movie, but you have to think it's not going to be as good if it wasn't Michael J. Fox. It just couldn't get up to that level, you would think. Sorry, I'm trying to get some more chats here. Let's see, Michael J. Fox, a lot of times turned up to Back to the Future drunk. I forgot some of his lines. Well, yeah, I would forget my lines too if I was drunk. He did. I know he does talk about he did have a drinking. I don't know if I want to say he maybe had a drinking problem as well in his 20s. Yeah, he did quite a bit of drinking at that time. Only a few months ago, Maximum, Michael J. Fox and Eric Stoltz actually met in person for the. That's kind of awkward. And I don't know if I haven't really heard much of Eric Stoltz in interviews. What his thoughts were. I don't know if he's really talked about being mad or being betrayed, being let go, or and all that. I don't know. That'd be interesting. Eric Stoltz side of the story. My guess is he probably just wants to forget about it. It might be sore subject matter. I don't know. All right, so that's some kind of just some making of the movie. I think it's interesting tidbits. Hopefully, you learned something from that. But anyways, the movie comes out. I don't know if they really thought about how big of a movie it's going to be. I feel like it, and it did gangbusters. It did incredible. It was like the biggest office movie of 1985, and it made a bunch of money. I think it made way more money than they even expected. I mean, it's such a huge hit. It's really phenomenal. Like I said, 40 years later, I mean, to me, it's still one of the greatest movies of all time. I think people still talk about it. Still, people still watch it today. It has not gotten old or outdated at all. Even special effects still look pretty good today, I think. Anyway, so and to me, it's just an iconic movie that everybody knows about, and it really launched the career of Michael J. Fox. Even though he had family ties, I think this really launched him as a leading man. I think Christopher Lloyd, I think, got better roles after this. I mean, even though he was already in Taxi, almost really helped his career out. But mostly Michael J. Fox. I suppose this really was his vehicle that really launched him into a star in a sense. Um, let's see. Bob Gale is publicly said as long as Eric Stoltz is working actor, they will not release the full Stoltz cut of the movie. Yeah, that would be crazy. I've seen like little scenes of him in it doing my doing Marty McFly and all that. But yeah, I don't know how much they did shoot quite a bit of footage though, didn't they, Mike? I think there's quite a bit that they did with him that they had to reshoot. And I think it's funny because I remember Christopher Lloyd. I think he said like, yeah, he's doing the movie with Eric Stoltz, and then I think they had to once they got rid of him and they had to get Michael J. Fox in, and then they had to reshoot the scene. So I think there was a little time where the actors weren't shooting the movie; they were waiting for all that to work out, and then they came back to the that part where they're outside in the dark, and uh, uh, Doc Brown is showing Marty time travel for the first time in the parking lot. And I think Chris Floyd shows up, and there's Michael J. Fox, and so it's a little bit of surprise, like, oh, I've been working with this other actor all this time. Now I got to work with a different actor. So it's always kind of weird, I think, changing actors midway like that. But yeah, so the movie did really well. What's crazy is that the movie did not get nominated for Best Picture. I think it's insane. It should have not only obviously I think it should have won. I think it's the best movie of 1985 by far. But the crazy that it didn't get nominated when it's such a big hit. I don't know what it is because of sci-fi. It was too comedy. I don't know. Robert Zemeckis was not a known director at the time, or not as known. I don't know. It was weird that that did not get nominated. Um, it did win one Oscar for sound effects, which was a good Oscar because I do like the when they turn on all the times when they turn on the DeLorean and have to deal with the time travel aspect. When it would go 88 miles, it go had a really cool sound effect. So I think sound effects were great. It was nominated for screenplay, which is insane that it didn't win screenplay because that's like the best part of the movie. One of the best parts is it's an amazing screenplay. So at least Zemeckis and Gale got nominated for screenplay. I'm glad they got nominated. They should have won there. And then it got nominated for best song for "Power of Love" by Huey Lewis and News. So I got best song, which is kind of cool because it's just a really nice, catchy '80s song, "Power of Love," by one of my favorite '80s bands, Huey Lewis and News, which I really like that band. So and that was just I think they when they hired Huey Lewis and the News, like hey, they're a big '80s band at the time. Of course they did Back in Time, which kind of goes with the movie because it's Back to the Future. So Back in Time was, and then they wanted another movie. I think they wanted another song or something. I can't remember, but they didn't really like having specifics. Like, oh, we just want an '80s, we just want a Huey Lewis News, kind of pop song. And so then they came up with Power of Love, which ended up getting an Oscar nomination, and a great song. I love both songs. Are really great songs out of this. Anyways, um, what's crazy is Alvin Silvestri, who did the score, should have been nominated for the score. It is such a good score. The dun 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 da da dun dun dun. Da, 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 da. Oh, the score is amazing. Every time, and what I love about the movie, I guess I'll talk about this here in a second, but yeah, that score. Anyway, Silvestri should have been nominated, if not won, for the score. But anyways, but yeah, so that's kind of the making of the movie and kind of how it's come to be. It's such an iconic big movie for at least me, for Mike, for other people. Anyways, um, now I wanted to do some kind of ranking categories here. Again, I just doing this on a whim, kind of. I just came with this idea this week. Want to talk about this big movie, and I can't talk about it except for being on November 5th. It has to be on November 5th. It's the only time I feel like is a good time to talk about this movie. So one thing I thought I'd do is as 5 reasons why Back to the Future is a great movie. Number one, the story. It is one of the best stories I've ever seen, and that's what I've always clung on to when I was even younger. That I loved about it. Um, there's not a wasted moment in this movie. I think every scene is amazing. There's no slow moments. The pace is perfect, I think. And it's a movie that, again, it has sci-fi elements. It has action, adventure kind of elements. It has comedy. It's very funny. Anyways, it has drama, some emotional moments that actually make me tear up in this movie. Romance. I mean, it just hits a lot of different aspects that I really love. And I just think there's a lot of good moments where they, like, the movie starts with clocks, it's a movie, it's going to be a movie about time travel. And, you get, him trying to, he's auditioning, his band is auditioning at the beginning. And at the end, you have him playing the Johnny Be Good in 1955. So I love that they kind of, there's a lot of those moments where they introduce an idea early in the movie and then it pays off later on. That's, to me, a good screenplay. And I think that's what's so great about that. I even love, like, when Michael J. Fox is at Doc Brown's house, that you see the plutonium box underneath the bed. So that just kind of sets the stage of, like, oh yeah, when he talks about plutonium, you go, oh yeah, I remember seeing that plutonium case under Doc's bed. That's where, yeah. So there's little bits like that I actually love about the movie that I think does real well. And I just really love the idea that, he goes back in time. He sees there's this story that he lived. I even love the character arcs of, like, George McFly is kind of this goofball weenie, still gets bullied by Biff even as an adult. He's just a real coward and a real goofball. And the mom, I love how the mom is like, what, girls calling boys? We didn't do that when I was that, and then you find out that she was, like, a very rebellious boy crazy girl who smoked and drank and yeah, and was going after boys, and so I love that we see that anyway. So there's some great moments like that really pay off later in the movie, especially when you see him as teenagers. And I love that, there's this big story of Lorraine's dad hit George with the car. And he was in the street and he got hit with the car, and he brought him in the house because he had a head injury. And that's when Lorraine fell in love with George, and then that's when they started dating, and they eventually got married and had kids. And that's, like, the beginning of the love story. And then we get to see that happen in the movie, where he sees his dad, he sees his dad as a peeping Tom, which is like, what? My dad's a peeping Tom, which is kind of a funny moment um, of that, and then his dad's going to get hit by a car, and he goes and saves his dad because, he doesn't think about, that's how they fall in love, is when he gets hit by the dad car, and he's going to survive. But his instincts of, his dad going to get hit by a car, he gets in the way and he gets hit by the car. And that one instant basically almost ruined his life and his siblings' lives, because then his mom falls in love with him instead of his dad, George. And then, and again, one of my favorite story moments is when he has a picture in his pocket from 1985, whatever, and of him and his 2 siblings, his brother and sister. And when that happens, and you look at the picture, you can see them disappearing in the picture. What an amazing way to show, like, oh my gosh, if I don't correct these things, if I don't get my parents to fall in love again, we're not going to exist. And we see that by the picture. The picture is kind of our barometer of, like, do we exist or not? Later in the movie, he looks at it and all 3 of them are back in the picture, and you go, okay, good. I saved the future, So I love that. It's big stakes. Either you're never going to exist. If you don't get your parents to fall in love again, which, how do you do that? That's not an easy thing to do. Then you're going to not exist. So it's paramount that you get your parents to fall in love with each other and figure out how to do that, so you'll exist in the future. I don't know. I love that story idea. one of the best story ideas I think ever written, in my opinion, I guess. And that's what always I think works for this movie. It's a great story. And again, I love the ending because I love at the end, because the thing was like his dad uh, secretly loved sci-fi or loved writing stories, and he never knew his dad loved writing stories. And then he sees his dad writing, he's like, "What are you doing?" It's like, "Oh, just write," And then he kind of encourages dad to say like, "You can do anything you put your mind to," or something like that. And through it's funny, through his influence of his dad in the past, his dad decides to write some sci-fi stories, and they get published, and he makes money off of that. And so then we come to the future. The house is he has a better house he lives in, better cars, and he's fairly wealthy. And it's all because, and he shows the book that he published, and it's all because so if he never went back into the past, he never would have influenced his dad to be a better person or whatever, and to write the books, and to be successful. So I love that. It's such a great story idea, that him going in the past actually changed his life for the better, and his dad's life for the better. So I love that, absolutely love that. You can see that through his brother is wears a suit. He works in the office. His sister gets calls from boys all the time. She's got a lot of different boyfriends, and even they seem like the love life between his parents were better and all that. Everything just seems better. And Biff is washing the cars. The bully that was George's boss is now working for George. So it's all works out really great in the end. Yeah, so a story to me is just one of the best stories ever written, in my opinion. Let's see what Mike has. It's a perfect movie. Okay, one, perfect pacing. Totally agree. That goes with the story. It is such a great, not a slow moment in this movie or a boring moment. Two, rewatch factor. Yeah, I can watch this. I've watched this movie so many times. I still watch it today and I still laugh at it, still get emotional, still enjoy a lot of moments in it. Um, Three, you notice something new on every watch. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Uh, yeah, I think that's very true. They do. Yeah, because like for instance, I never realized until later, like someone pointed out that um, the shopping mall, I think it's called Three Pines. You might have to remind me of this, Mike, but I think it's called like Three Pines Shopping Mall or something like that. And then when he goes back in 1955, the parking lot used to be just a field. In fact, they mentioned it. Someone mentions that this used to be a field before they paved it for a parking lot. They mentioned that, and then when he goes back in 1955, he's in the same spot, but now it's a farm field because it was before they ever made the shopping mall, and he's in the door, and he runs over one of the pine trees. There's three pine trees. He runs over a pine tree. Again, this is something I didn't notice till later on. When we go back to 1985, the shopping mall is now called Two Pines, I think, shopping mall, instead of Three Pines, because he ran over one of the pine trees. It's such a cool idea, and I never would have caught that until someone mentioned it, and I was like, "What a cool idea!" Like, it totally changed. Anyway, yeah. So there are little moments like that that you do catch on multiple watches, which is cool. Four, related story about bowling and confidence. And yeah, Mike, I know you talked about this on your channel because this is again, you're this is what you're mostly known for. Is like you're a huge Back to the Future fan. You got the tattoos. You've been to all these Comic Cons or something. Back to anyways. I think you met Michael J. Fox. You met Bob Gale, and all this cool stuff. Yeah, and it talks about bowling. I know that's a big deal for you, like the whole bowling part, and in confidence. I know that's a big moment for you, growing up. I guess watching this movie, dealing with bowling and having the confidence and all that stuff like that. Yeah, uh, yeah, I do. Yeah, the moment when George steps up to the bully is, again, I'll talk about this later actually, but it's such a great moment. Of him standing up to Biff the bully and how that changes everything. Yeah, it's great. And then fifth, anyone of any age can enjoy it. Yeah, I'll agree with that. I loved it as a kid, and as an adult, you get more. I feel like as a kid, you just love the adventure of it and the action moments. And then as an adult, you get more into the story elements and the character arcs. Really reach you even more, I suppose, as you get older. So yeah, definitely. But yeah, number one, story. Number two, chemistry between Marty and Doc Brown, or Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. I think probably one of the best parts of this movie is that friendship is so good. It's weird because you have a guy who's, like I said, he's in his late 40s, and you have a guy who's in his like mid 20s, 24. It's like 47, 24 are the ages of two people. That's a weird age to like have a friend that you hang out with that's that much older. It's twice your age, almost. You know, it's kind of a weird thing, but yet it works so well in these movies. And you get that at the end of this movie, of course. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit, but gosh, it's such a great moment when you think Doc Brown's dead, but I'm spoiling this movie, but you think Doc Brown's dead, but then he's not, and just how happy Marty is that Doc Brown's not dead. Oh my gosh, it kills me every time. Anyways, but even throughout the whole movies, second and third one, and again, this is just Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd are so good together. They both are very funny actors. When you think about it, Michael J. Fox comes from a comedy background with Family Ties, and he was kind of the funniest character in that TV show, from what I know. Christopher Lloyd was from Taxi, and he was probably the funniest character in that show as well. So both have this great, sitcom comedy background. And man, they just work so well together as characters, as actors. I've always loved those two actors and those two characters together. Just so great for the whole franchise, anyways. Third reason why this is such a great movie is the music. And I talked about music already from Alan Silvestri, but man, they do such a good job. It just elevates this movie up even higher when anytime there's like the action scene or something happens, all of a sudden you get that bum 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 bum. Like it'll hit you like at certain parts, and man, is it so good when that score comes in. You just go, oh my gosh, it's exciting. The scene just gets so much more exciting. That's how the power of music in movies, I think. And this is a good example where the music cues really work in this movie at the right times, anyways, to elevate it. So love the music. Number four, there's some great intense scenes in this movie that give you on the edge, that make you put you on the edge of your seat, I think, which makes this movie even more exciting every time I watch it. Um, what I mean by that, like even like the beginning when Doc Brown gets shot by the Libyans, that's, oh my gosh, that's such a tense scene. Seeing someone get shot, and then they're chasing him, and they got the rocket launcher, and he's like, "Let's see if your bastards can go 88," and then he, you know, hits it, and then he disappears. It's a great scene, tense scene overall. We're like, "Oh my god, what's gonna happen?" Love that scene. I mean, even love like when Biff has Marty, he has him kind of held his arm, and he's laughing at him, and the music swells up, and you're like, what's going to happen? What is George going to do? How's he going to get out of the situation? He needs to, stop this from happening. He needs to, all these things need to happen. Even there's a scene where Marty's like playing the guitar, and this guy cuts in on George and Lorraine during the dance, and he's like, he falls down, and he looks at his hand starts disappearing. Another great intense scene. And then one of the best ones is when he's in the car, and he's going to go 88 miles per hour, and they got this wire they know the lightning's going to strike right at this time, so he has to hit the wire right at the same time as the lightning. And so Doc, like the thing gets unplugged, and he has to climb the tower and plug the thing back in. And the thing's like falling, and it's on its leg, and he has to reach down and get it. And then he zip lines down, and then he plugs it in right at the exact time the lightning hits, that he hits it. Oh, it's just so good. I love those scenes. But yeah, so the intense scenes, and again, that goes with the editing. The editing is so good. Oh my gosh. With the music, the editing, the intensity, it just makes it such a more exciting movie. And then the fifth thing that I love about this movie so much that makes it such a great movie is it is so funny. I said it has all kinds. It has drama, comedy, action, whatever. But I think one of the best aspects is it makes me laugh so hard every time I watch this movie. Like I said, Michael, with Doc Brown with the 21 gigawatts, him freaking out is so good. I love just George McFly, like, hey, just the way he walks is funny. I don't know, and just the way he acts. And um, uh, anyway, I'm gonna talk about some of these scenes here, but hi, I'm your density. I mean, destined. And just the whole line delivery of Jordan McFly is so funny. Even Biff, make like a tree and get out of here, instead of saying make like a tree and leave, and what are you looking at, butthead? So many good lines in this movie. And I love the scene where he's uh, they're in the school. Doc Brown and Marty McFly. He's trying to find his dad, I think, or something. Anyways, and and Michael J. Fox says, "Well, that's heavy," or something like that, which is just expression. But it's not expression they used back in the '50s. So um, uh, Doc Brown hears and goes, "Heavy? What happens in the future? There's something wrong with that with the gravity that things are heavy." Anyways, I thought he took too seriously the expression heavy. Anyways, and of course, Great Scott. Every time he says Great Scott, it's great. Uh, it is an absolutely hilarious movie, I think. And that's one of the aspects I really love about this movie. Um, like I said, when you have Michael J. Fox, who's a great comedic actor, I think, Christopher Lloyd and Tom Wilson also, and Crispin Glover. I mean, all great comedic actors, in my opinion. All right, those are the 5 reasons why this movie is great. So I'm going to end the stream and talk about my 10 favorite moments in Back to the Future. These 10 moments I think of the most when I think of most watchability and all that. All right, number 10. My 10 favorite moment is the scene I've been talking about where he finally he has to go find Doc Brown from 1955, who doesn't know who Marty McFly is, of course, because he hasn't been born yet. And he finds him, doing science experiments, and he tells him about how, he's back, he's from the future, and of course he doesn't believe him, and he has a, and he goes through all these scenes of like who's the president? Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, the actor. Who's vice president? Jerry Lewis. There's some great moments there. But the moment when he gets him convinced that he is from the future, um, and then he watches the VHS tape of what happens, of him talking about time travel and that you need 21 gigawatts or whatever. And I love that moment. Again, I've talked about it, but it's one of my favorite moments, I think, is when 21 gigawatts. He freaks out. And then you find out that, he says plutonium might be sold on the every, street corner back in 85, which it's not. But, there's no way to get that much power. I love that whole scene. Anyways, that's number 10. Number 9, I'm just gonna say I love the Power of Love scene. I love that song, Power of Love. I think it's right at the beginning when he's trying to go to school and he's on the skateboard, he's hitching on cars. As a kid, I always thought that was cool. I was like, man, this is definitely a movie that wants you to get a skateboard. It's such a good skateboard movie that it's like, man, I tried it. I never had a skateboard, but I think I tried doing a skateboard. I never could figure out how they work. I'd get on it and it wouldn't move. And when I tried to move, I'd just like fall off. And so I was like, I don't understand skateboards. I never understood them. But I thought that was so cool of him, like riding on the back of cars. And I'm sure in real life that's not a safe thing to do, but it looked cool. But I love that scene where he's trying to get to school. He's late to school, and we get the whole "It's the power of love." Oh, so good. Number 8. I'm just going to talk about the ending scene. I think is so good. Like I already mentioned a lot of this already, but just when he goes back to 85 and he finds that his parents are, successful, his dad's kind of cool. He wrote a book and is a successful writer. And his, like I said, his brother is successful, office guys. His sister has a bunch of boyfriends. And he's, like, what happened, But I just love that whole reveal of how 85 has changed because of what he did, going back in time and changing the past, and how that's made his life better. Even going to the garage, and he's got the cool car that he wanted, went back in before the time change. And then Biff is washing the cars. The guy who always bullied George in high school is now working for him, and now Biff. I'm sorry, Mr. McFly. I'll get on that. I love all that. Anyway, so yeah, the ending, just one of the best endings I think of any movie. Number 7 favorite scene is I talked about already, but I love the George McFly trying to ask Lorraine out in the diner. He finally gets George, convinced that he needs to ask Lorraine out to the dance and all this, the whatever. And he's trying to, hype him up. Like, what do you, he's like, I don't even know. What do I say to her? He's just like, he's like, I don't know. Tell her. I love the scene. He's like, tell her you're her destiny. Girls love that kind of stuff. And he's like writing it down in a book, and he's like enjoy. And Marty's like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm writing it down. This is really good stuff. And he's like, oh, Dad, you're such a dork, you know. And he's like, anyways, and they go to the diner, and he's trying to walk in with confidence and chocolate milk. Chocolate milk, and he drinks some chocolate milk, puts it down. He's trying to walk cool to Lorraine, you know. And he takes out his book, his little book, you know, and he's a little bit shaky, so nervous. And the hi Lorraine, I'm, you know, and then I think he gets something happens, and she's like, oh, I know you, or something like that. He's like, yes, I'm George McFly, and I am your density. And she looks at him kind of confused, like, I'm your density. I mean, I'm your destiny, or something like that. Just love the whole scene. Love, to me, it's Crispin Glover's one of his best scenes in the movie. Best performance, I say. It's one of my favorite performances of Crispin Glover, where he showcases how funny he can be in that scene. Anyways, and just really showcases George McFly as a character. Anyways, that's number 7. Number 6, I have the scene where Doc Brown is trying to plug in for the wire to the clock tower, so that Marty can hit it at the right time that lightning hits. That whole scene is so, again, I said it's a very exciting, tense scene. I know I talked about it already, but yeah, I love how he has to climb up the clock tower. He has to like wrap it around the thing, and he's up high and all this, and a tree like comes down and ruins the plug, and so he has to plug in this part, and he has to zip line down, and anyways, I love that scene. It's so exciting, so intense. Yeah, great scene there. Let's see, what should I go with? Um, Number 5, I'm going with the first time Jordan McFly kisses Lorraine in the dance. Uh, and what I love about the scene so much, and again, I talked about it already, but uh, it's after he actually already punches Biff out, and you're thinking, okay, this is the scene, this is the time when they're going to fall in love, and you know, Marty's successful. He got his parents to fall back in love, so now everything's okay. And he's up on stage playing the guitar, and it's a scene that probably doesn't need to be done. It seems like an extra scene that maybe doesn't be done. It's a This random bully like comes in and pushes George away and takes Lorraine, and Lorraine's like, George, and it looks like George is gonna walk away, like what a coward, you know. They're like, oh, George, you just punched out the biggest bully in school that's been terrorizing you, and now this other guy is gonna like get in your way of the rain. Anyways, it is kind of a weird thing that happens there, but I still love the scene so much because of a couple things. One, I love that, um, you hear the bullies laugh, ha ha ha, he's laughing, George, and you're like, oh God, what's gonna happen? What happened? And even that little scene, it's like that's gonna ruin the future because Marty, that's the scene I talked about, where Marty like kind of falls down and his hand starts disappearing, which is amazing. I love that. And it's like, oh no, he's about to disappear as a person because his parents are never gonna fall in love. And it looks like everything's so dire, and all of a sudden George comes back, and he butts back in, and he pushes him down the ground, and then they kiss. And once they kiss, his hand comes back from disappearing, and he kind of jumps up, and they're singing like Earth Angel or something like that, and he goes back into this. I don't know. I still love that scene. I think it's a really cool, intense scene, and the showing of him disappearing, I think it's such a cool idea. So I'm still putting that at number 5. Number 4 goes along with that scene. It's probably number 1. It's the most iconic scene of the movie. But there's 3 more scenes I like more. So I'm putting this at number 4. But Marty McFly playing Johnny Be Good. I mean, come on. Like I said, one of the funnest parts of the whole movie. Really great. It's probably a scene that everybody thinks about. Like I said, it could be number 1, maybe the most well-known scene of the movie. That if you don't even know that movie that well, you'll still remember that scene. And yeah, it's great when they're like, he's because one of the guitar player in this group broke his hand. He can't play, and they're like we can't play, and he's like, well, you gotta play because if you don't play, then people don't kiss and fall in love and all this stuff. And he goes, well, unless you can find another guitar player, and then jump cut to him playing the guitar, because he's, again, we established that he was a guitar player earlier in the movie, so that's a great callback. And then they play, and they're like, hey, how about you do something, pick a song. that you want to play. He's like, really? Okay. And then he decides to go with Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry. Love that song. One of my favorite songs, one of my favorite 50 songs. It's definitely my favorite Chuck Berry song. Uh, and this is probably the first time I ever heard of this song. I bet I heard Johnny Be Good first in Back to the Future before I knew it was Chuck Berry. I didn't know who Chuck Berry was. I don't think as a kid. So I'm sure this is my introduction to Chuck Berry without even knowing it. And I'm curious if anybody out there, this is your first time you ever heard. It's like Wayne's World. I heard Queen for the first time when I watched Wayne's World, and it's like I heard Chuck Berry for the first time watching this movie. Um, but yeah, when he goes in that, and I loved it as a kid. I was like, man, this is a cool tune. But that whatever that goes into that, Johnny Be Good, and he's doing all those. Uh, yeah, that's such a fun scene. It's a great dance scene overall. The camera panning across the people dancing is so good. And then him going a little crazy and doing the duck walk and doing all kinds of different, jumping off of the amp, and then everybody kind of looks at him because the song hasn't come out yet in this time period. Yet it's an old song, and yeah, it's such a fun scene. And then what makes it even better is that I think the whole this is your cousin. Uh, you're looking for that new sound. Well, listen to this. And the idea that Chuck Berry heard Marty play it, and then so Marty McFly changed history. He was the first one to play Johnny Be Good, and that's and Chuck Berry, heard it, and then he would have came up with it anyway, so it didn't really change anything. But still, that's a kind of funny nod to Chuck Berry. Anyways, again, yeah, great scene. Number 4 on my list. Number 3, my third favorite scene in the movie, is the Marty McFly skateboard chase scene after the hitting Biff in the diner in 1955. I always love that scene. A scene that always stays with me. It's such a fun action scene. And again, somewhat more iconic scene there. Again, it's after uh, George tries to, ask Lorraine out, but then Biff comes in. Hey, McFly. Oh, I should say Billy Zane is one of his goons. It's funny. Billy Zane, who go on to be like Titanic and other stuff. But yeah, him coming in. McFly, I thought I told you never to come in here. And then uh, how much money you got? He's trying to get money off him and totally ruining his, trying to ask Lorraine out, make him look like a dork and a weakling. And then Marty gets involved, like I said. And again, I love the scene where he trips him and he stands up. And at first he stands up and he's kind of eye level with Marty McFly. But then he starts staying all the way up and you realize, oh, he's way taller. Of course, it's Michael J. Fox. So he's like, he is. And the scene is so good because you can see Michael J. Fox's eyes just peer over his shoulder, like, and him looking up like, oh my God, I forgot how big Biff is, and he's about to, beat him up. And then what the hell is that? And then him looking, and then he runs off and they're like, let's go get him. And then that starts the whole scene, and he comes across a kid who like has like a skateboard, but he has like a thing that he holds on to. And he said, hey, he takes it and he breaks off the one part. It's, I guess, the invention of skateboard. I guess skateboard wasn't invented yet. So he makes a skateboard for the first time and he's skating and they're in the car and they're chasing him and he's running into people or whatever. And it's just a great action scene. The music kicks in, the bum, 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 whatever. The great action music is coming in. And then the scene, this part that really makes it, I absolutely always loved and thought was a cool scene, is that they got him and he's like holding on to the car with the skateboard and they're going to try to, basically kill him. And it's attempted murder, basically. They're going to run him into something and, basically kill the guy. And so he looks and he sees, and that scene where, again, he's kind of riding backwards as the car is pushing him. And then he jumps onto the hood of the car, runs, it's a convertible. So he runs through the middle of the guys and then jumps back onto the skateboard. So cool. So awesome. I love how that plays out. That he gets off the skateboard goes underneath the car, he goes over, it's perfectly timed. Like, how hard would that be? Perfectly times it to get back up. But oh my gosh, that moment when he realizes like what to do, and you see him jump on the car, and you're like, oh my God, what's he doing? And he gets back on there, and they're like, huh? And then he, oh crap! And then they let's get into some manure and manure, the famous manure scene that happens in all three movies, where he gets hit with manure and then I hate manure. He poops out or he spits out some manure in his mouth. Yeah, love that scene. My favorite action scene of the whole movie. And as a kid, I thought that was so cool. I just remember the first time seeing that movie going, that was one of the coolest scenes I've ever seen in a movie. And again, love to do that in real life. Never would I be able to, but yeah, so that's number 3 on my list. Let me take a drink here. All right. Number 2 on my list, my second favorite scene of the movie, is the most emotional scene of this movie. And quite honestly, when I watch it now, it makes me tear up. I think it's such a beautiful moment. But it is towards the end when he's going to come back to 1985. The only problem is Doc, he gets killed. He gets shot by the Libyans early in the movie. We see Doc Brown get murdered, Uh, and so he knows when he goes back to the future that Doc Brown's going to get murdered. So he even tries to tell Doc Brown, tries to warn him, hey, on November 5th, 1985, I guess, I don't know if it's November 5th, but at this time in 1985, where I'm going back into time, whatever, back to where I started, in the movie, that, you're going to get murdered. So just a warning, just, take some precautions that, that will help you save your life at this moment. And he wants to tell him, but Doc's like, don't tell me about the future. I don't want to know anything about the future. We can't, mess with the future, or mess with time, or, something, because, he just knew that something bad could happen if you know your own future and stuff like this. And so, like, and then he writes a note because he's like, man, I just have to tell Doc that he's gonna die, and I just gotta do something so he doesn't die, because I can't. He's my best friend. I can't lose him. So he writes a note. He's gonna like hide it, I think, in his pocket, so that he would maybe find it and read it, and then again prepare or whatever. And so he kind of gives him the letter. And he's like, "What's this?" And he's like, "It's about the future." And he's like, "No, I can't." And he ends up ripping it up. I believe he rips up like this paper, and so like, oh my god, there's a chance to save Doc's life. And the whole time he's thinking, I got to get back to save. Anyway, so then he goes back, and he in that time he's like, I got a time machine. I got the time in the world. And he puts, not only going back to the time, but going back like 10 minutes earlier, so he can go save Doc's life before he gets shot. So he really wants to save Doc's life. But then when he goes back into 1985, the car runs out of whatever gas or whatever, plutonium, and so then he has to get out of the car and run the rest of the way. And he gets there, right as Doc gets shot again. He was too late. The whole thing is he wanted to get back in time to save Doc's life, and he was too late. Doc is dead. And then he sees his part where he gets chased by the Libyans, and then he goes, shoots in the future. So his 1985 self is now gone. So then he can now go on to, Doc's body. And man, this is such a sad scene, because you're like, oh my God, he wanted to save Doc's life. He messed up. He's too late. And he's sitting there crying, because of this. And then that moment when we see Doc rise up, he sits up, and Marty looks at him like, "Oh my God, you're still alive!" And as an audience, you're like, "How is he still alive?" And he reveals that he has a bulletproof vest on, and when he got shot in the chest, whatever, he survived the shots because of that. And you're like, What happened here?" And then he reveals that he took the pieces of paper and got him back together and read the note that he gave him, that he was going to get shot at this time. So I guess he's able to prepare for by wearing a bulletproof vest, which wouldn't change the future too much, except that he's alive now instead of dead. But then doing any other damage. Anyways, but I don't know. That moment is so emotional. Like I don't know if I got that emotional when I was a kid watching it. I still think it was a great moment, but I think I love it even more now, just knowing like, oh man, what a great friendship they have, and how sad. And again, great performance by Michael J. Fox. Maybe his best performance of the movie. Him looking down at Doc's dead body and being so sad about Doc. He couldn't save him. He could have saved him, but wasn't able to. Um, yeah, it's such a heartbreaking moment. But even though I know Doc's alive, it still breaks my heart when I see that moment, because of Michael J. Fox's great performance there. And then seeing him come back to life, oh man, what a great moment of that realization that, oh my gosh, Doc is still alive. And the music is great during that moment as well. And I don't know, it's just a really the best, most emotional, most heartwarming kind of moment in the movie. And him saying, "I just, what's all that about not knowing your future?" And he says, I just thought, what the hell, or something like that. Great line there. And I just love the friendship throughout the whole series. Like second movie, third movie. Again, I said one of the best parts of this movie is those two characters and their chemistry together. And yeah, and that shows it right there, just how emotionally involved I am in the characters that I get really sad at that moment. Anyway, so yeah, love that movie moment. Love that emotional moment there in the movie. All right, so it goes to my favorite scene in the movie. And if anybody knows me, I talk about the scene probably quite a bit. I've talked to Mike about it quite a bit, I think. And this is one of the best scenes of any movie I've ever seen. Why I love this movie so much. And anytime the scene comes on, if I'm doing something, I stop what I'm doing and I'm like, I gotta watch a scene. I've seen it so many times, but it still hits me kind of emotional. It really is an emotional scene, to be honest. And it still gives me goosebumps every time I see this movie. I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's so good how they do this, the editing, the music, and just the character arc of George is so good in this moment. And that is when he finally punches out Biff. Uh, and again, I'll set the scene because I love talking about the scene so much. But I love it because the whole thing is like Marty's supposed to be this movie. The scene was supposed to, I mean, the way Marty was setting it up was that he was going to be in the seat with his mom, and then George is going to open it up and stop him, and stop him from doing anything, I guess, and be kind of the hero of the moment, and that's going to make Lorraine fall in love with him, kind of because he's protecting her or whatever. And then Biff comes in, takes out George, or takes out Marty. Marty gets locked in a trunk or whatever by the goons, and then he's basically going to sexually assault Lorraine, which is, man, really awful. Like, he should be in jail. Biff should be in jail. Should be a sex offender, not washing cars necessarily, but especially if the person he was being a sexual offender to. But it's one of the flaws maybe of the movie. But but that moment when she's stuck in the back seat and he's like gets in the back seat with her, oh my gosh, he's going to sexually assault Lorraine. It is a terrifying moment, and all that, woman in peril and all that. And then George comes on the scene, not knowing it's Biff. He still thinks it's Marty back there, and he opens the door, and he's been rehearsing this line over and over. I love that, even that scene where he's like, "Hey, get your damn hands off her," I think he says, or something like that. And he goes, and earlier he's rehearsing the scene, and he's like, "Should I cuss?" he's bothered by him, the idea that he's going to curse or something like that. And Marty's like, "Yeah, Dad," or George, whatever. "Yeah, go ahead and curse." But anyway, so he opens the door, and he's all that great performance by Crispin Glover, that shakiness, he does, and then that realization when he opens it up, you know, or he's gonna say, "Get your damn hands off her," and he's like, "Hey," and then it's revealed that's Biff, it's not Marty, and then he's like, "Oh my god," and you see the look on his face, like, "Oh god, like, I didn't know this was gonna be Biff. I thought it was gonna be Marty." And here is the biggest bully in my school, who's much bigger and stronger than me, who's been terrorizing me all this time, makes me do his homework, uh, you know, steals money from me, And here he is going face to face with Biff, and Biff sees him and is like, "I think you got the wrong car," or something like that, And he's like, "No, Biff, you get your hands off her," You know, it's so good that he could have been a coward. He could have walked away like he always has. He's always been kind of that coward. But some reason at that moment, he decides to be the hero and decides to call Biff out, even though he knows he's outmatched by Biff, and all this. He still is like, "I'm still going to, protect Lorraine. I'm still going to, here Lorraine is in trouble. I'm going to, all that, So he gets some courage. Uh, to be a man. He finally, it's like, here's a guy who, I said, he's a coward, he's not a man, and that's the moment where he becomes a man. And I love that about this character in this moment, and what a great character arc it is. And then Biff's like, "Are you kidding me?" And he gets out, like, and then George goes to punch him, and he catches his hand, and he kind of twists his arm, and Lorraine, "Hey, you're gonna break his arm," and she even gets on him, and he pushes her against the car, and he sees her fall down, and he's got that look, and he looks up at Biff, and Biff not really looking at him because he's just laughing because he's the whole most horrible human being ever. He just pushed Lorraine, who's going to sexually assault, pushed her on the ground. He's just laughing. He's just laughing up this moment. And this scene where George like sees it and he gets this intense look in his eyes. And again, I love the editing is so good. If you see the intensity, you hear the intensity in the music, you see the intensity in his eyes, and then it closes up on his hand, which is like this, and then you see him get into a fist. Maybe the best shot of the whole movie is his hand going into the fist. You're like, oh, here it comes. Like he's, getting ready to punch Biff and, fight back. And just how he does that part. And then Biff, not even seeing that he's going about to punch him, turns his head, to look at him. And at that moment, I think the music even goes out. I think it's like intense music, and then it kind of clears out as he punches him so hard that he even spins around, I think, against the car, falls down it was such a big punch that knocks him out. But just the way that plays out and him, it looks like there's no way George is going to win this fight. He is such an underdog in such a bad spot. But the fact that he becomes a man at that moment and protects Lorraine against the bully and becomes the hero. What a great moment. It is the moment of the movie, the best moment for me of the movie, and kind of emotional. I think it's an emotional scene of him, again, getting that courage to do that and doing something like that, which is against his character throughout the movie. And it's so satisfying because he hates Biff so much. So it's so great to see him finally get his comeuppance and get punched out by the person you never think would have done it, George McFly. And then after he punches him out, hey, are you okay? And at that moment you see that Lorraine's falling in love with George, and then they walk back. Of course, they should have called the police, like, hey, this Biff, or call the principal, tell somebody, hey, Biff just beat up Marty and tried to sexually assault Lorraine in the back of the car, and all this. Like, he should be going to jail for a very long time, I think, at this moment. But we don't get that, anyways. But yeah, that whole scene, it's, yeah, I said it's one of my favorite scenes of all time. Definitely my favorite scene in this movie, always will be. It's a scene that I just can't wait every time I watch this movie. I'm like, oh my God, here's the scene. Like, I get so excited. Here comes the scene where he punches out Biff and all that. Anyway, so yeah, favorite scene of this movie. And that kind of concludes this live stream, a little under 2 hours. Luckily, I don't know how long it's going to take to do this. But I appreciate anybody watching this. Anybody who loves Back to the Future like me, I hope you enjoy hearing something about this. If you don't know much about Back to the Future, hopefully you've learned something. I'm hoping I'm giving you some interesting information about the movie itself that you might not have known, whatever. And if you love it, I hope you just enjoy hearing me rant about how great of a movie this is. Obviously, it's a 10 out of 10 movie, number fourth favorite movie of all time. And yeah, always be, a top 10 movie for me. But please comment anything you want to talk about this movie. What's so great about Back to the Future? What do you love about this movie? What's your favorite scene? Anything, comment. Appreciate it so much. And thank you so much to Mike. I appreciate it so much, Mike. Great friend of mine. And love that I get to share my love for Back to the Future with you and get to talk about it with you. And hopefully this was enjoyable. Besides that, everybody have a great rest of the day, and we will see you later.